Hello students, now we will go to the second presentation on Walter Gropius and the Bauhaus. We had earlier looked at the example of the Workbund pavilion designed as a part of the Workbund exhibition by Walter Gropius, and where he started highlighting his ideas about what the modern building design should be, and it was a part which was related completely with the international style. And then the Fager Schulas factory that we looked at, and how his ideas about designing the industrial building were different from that of Peter Behrens. Our main focus in the last presentation was to look at or to discuss about Walter Gropius designing the building of the Bauhaus and how Bauhaus turned out to be fundamental to modern architectural education in terms of providing an interdisciplinary and integrated architectural education in the modern times, which involved art, architecture and industrial design. Coming to the Bauhaus building itself and the design of Bauhaus. It is the most important school of architectural design and art of the 20th century, and it literally means house for building, or the easier version would be if we split Bauhaus into two words, it means building house. A building, a house, a building that teaches us about designing. House for teaching us about building designing, put it that way. So, house for teaching us building design. It was founded in Weimar in Germany in 1919 and then moved to Dessau in 1924 due to economic considerations, but was forced then to move to Berlin in September of 1932 by the Nazis, and by 1933 it was formally shut down, and then Walter Gropius and Mies van der Rohe and other architects had to leave and they went over to the US. During its brief span from 1919 to 1933, it had three directors. There was Gropius, followed by Hans Mayer, and then there was Mies van der Rohe. Bauhaus represented what is the new building of the future. All these modernist architects, Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, Hans Mayer, Aude, Jean-Pierre Jeanneret, Marcel Breuer, all of them were working in the international style. But this one project by Walter Gropius actually propagated how architecture should be taught as design. So, its importance is not restricted to the work that Walter Gropius did, but how he was able to teach architecture to vast number of modern architectural students, to reach out to them and propagate the modernist movement among them. So, though the buildings of other architects are also very, very important and are very important case studies to learn modern architecture, but what Gropius did in terms of his vital contribution was to reach out the teaching of architecture to all these students. So, his contribution is so vital. The Bauhaus provided a new building of the future that combined everything in a single form: architecture, sculpture, painting, industrial designing, craft, all of it put together, and the development was appropriate to the times because industrial revolution already happened. We were much ahead in the industrial revolution, and this was much needed for the sake of housing and to design simple appliances and the finished building itself. Because we saw last time that industrial revolution had eased out the craftsmen. Though the products were being mass produced in large quantities to meet the aspirations of a rising middle class, but they were of atrocious quality. And at one time in the arts and crafts movement, people like John Ruskin, William Morris were putting the sole blame on industrial production of materials, and they went back again to handicraft, but that was not to be the answer. Because machines were here to stay, you couldn't turn back the clock on industrial revolution. Industrial revolution had its great benefits that materials, products could be mass produced and provided for a growing middle class. So, there was no way of turning back the clock, and what the Bauhaus did, what Walter Gropius did predominantly was to take the machine and combine it with sound aesthetic. Thus, whereas other architects focused primarily and their contributions are primarily reflected in building design, through Bauhaus, Walter Gropius's contribution are reflected in simple product design of appliances all the way to the building. House and furnishings must relate to each other is what Bauhaus tells us, something that architects like Frank Lloyd Wright also believed in. So Bauhaus Dessau is the best known work of Walter Gropius, and it is a laboratory of architectural ideas. Again I am repeating, the Bauhaus not only teaches us about modernist architectural principles through its design, but being the architectural school that it was, it teaches us modern architectural principles as a part of architectural education. So I hope you understand the two tremendous contributions of Bauhaus. As a building, it's a great contribution, and as an institution, it's a great contribution. The Bauhaus architecture, Gropius' analytical standards are applied to Bauhaus design. Analytical standards that he'd already started evolving when he designed the Workbund Pavilion, when he designed the Feger Schulas factory. In the Bauhaus, those principles got distilled to their finest quality in what Gropius was propagating. It is a new building of the future, everything put together in education in a single form. The entire complex, now coming to the building itself rather than the institution, the entire Bauhaus building complex is organized according to function. We will come to that point. This is it. All functional parts are separate. For example, the workshop building, the technical school, the offices, the dormitories, the auditorium and the dining hall, all are different, all are separate, but all are connected together through these connecting parts. All are connected together to work together, as it happens in the human body. We have different organs in the body, they all have distinct functions, but they are all connected together to work together, or as it happens in an integrated chip, where there are distinct parts on the chip, but they are all integrated together to work together. So they are different parts of the building connected via corridors and wings to work together. Thus arose the concept of functionalism. We've talked of minimalism under Walter Mies van der Rohe. We've talked of the international style and modernism and the 5 points of new architecture under Le Corbusier. We talked of organic architecture and propositions under Frank Lloyd Wright. Let's talk of functionalism under Walter Gropius. Design of buildings based on their purpose and function, individual parts distinct from each other, connected together to work together. The basic structure is a logical, thought out system of connecting wings. You see the wing is here and there is a wing here connecting these parts, then there is a wing here connecting this block with the dormitory behind it. The wings themselves are serving a functional purpose, they are not non-functional, just as in the human body. All the veins and arteries that connect the different organs in the body are not non-functional. They all serve a purpose. These all connecting wings have a purpose. In the Bauhaus architecture, there was open floor planning, something that was common to modernism or to the international style. This entire building is based on the pinwheel design. What you've seen a pinwheel, this is the pinwheel. It kind of, you can say the building rotates around a kind of a central axis, and the forms are radically simplified. The building is functional and industrial. It has got a white planar geometry which is common to the international style, and there is absence of ornamentation. This is the Bauhaus logo. This shows the ground floor plan and the first floor plan. This also led to the development of the skywalk. So this, or a sky bridge. So this building corridor that you see here, it is not there at the ground level. There is a through and through passage underneath that bridge, and then it appears on the first floor. So this sky bridge then got turned into a skywalk, and architect A.P. Kanvinde in India used it in IIT Kanpur and even on our campus here at IIT Roorkee. This picture, when we try to correlate it, This shot was taken from here, and from here you are able to see the sky bridge, and you see the walk underneath the sky bridge or the skywalk. And then this picture was taken from here that shows you this glass wrapped around the workshop wing. As you would remember, it was in the Fager's shoe last factory. This shot again taken from the sky bridge or the skywalk from the other side, and it is taken from here, and here you see the dormitory wing, which is at the back of the building. There are smooth facades, ample amount of daylight flooding into the building, cubic shapes favoring right angles that you find throughout the building, and then it is a composition of these white cuboidal blocks which are unornamented, all these white cuboidal blocks, and extensive use of glass. The materials which are used were revolutionary for the time, steel, glass and RCC. Please understand, when I say revolutionary, then you will say then but Corbusier were using it, but then all of them were using it chronologically at the same period. It was revolutionary for the period itself. So there was a whole group of architects that were using these materials in architecture. These minimalist and functionalist forms that we find here, and there is a pioneering use of steel in curtain walls that we find here, that Walter Gropius is doing it, and then you would find that this is happening in the in the mid 1920s. Just a few years later, we would find the use of steel much later, actually somewhere in the 1950s, by Mies van der Rohe in the Lakeshore Drive apartments in a tall building, followed within the next few years in the Seagram building. So this sheer glass curtain wall that he provided actually became a fundamental example or a pioneering example of glass curtain walling in the 20th century with this recessed steel structural frame. And you can see here the columns have been pushed back inside so that the glass curtain wall is completely free as to make the glass box on the outside. There is penetration of abundant natural light, and it emphasized the use of modern technology and mass production techniques. Many of these elements were standardized. Because of standardization, they could be mass produced in the factory, brought on site and assembled. So now we understand why standardization and modular construction is important, because mass production requires standardization, because those products are to be produced in the assembly line through machines. They need to be standardized, and the same kind of product is produced repeatedly en masse. What this movement did, what Bauhaus did, what it was teaching was, this mass produced standardized components could be very harmoniously put together in a wonderful aesthetic form, something that had gone missing from mass production because of the Industrial Revolution. And not only here in the building, but you would find that many other products that Bauhaus started producing, which I will show you, this same technique was applied. The standardized mass produced goods could have a wonderful aesthetic. This is the dormitory, and this has got these balconies that have been made in it. Then the furniture itself is a part of the philosophy of standardization. You can find these chairs designed within the Bauhaus, lamps designed within the Bauhaus, furniture designed within the Bauhaus. The Vasily chair designed by Marcel Breuer you find here, it is being used here, and many other. There is again a chair designed by Marcel Breuer. Even within the washroom, the way the various components of the washroom have been put together was unique to the Bauhaus design philosophy. Bauhaus wanted to remain free of style. I had mentioned that in the last presentation, how when the international style word was used, Mies van der Rohe said we're not talking of any dogma or style, but a pattern did emerge. A pattern that then became common for many modern buildings, that is cubist form, flat roofs and facades with no ornamentation, windows with shades. And this became a common template for many buildings that were built in the modern times. This is a pictures of the Bauhaus interiors. Now to compare Bauhaus and the Fager's factory in terms of the open interiors and how common they are, how similar they are. the similarity between both of them. This is Bauhaus, the open interiors, the way the daylight is flooding through, and we find the same thing happening in the Vegas Schulas factory. This is more integrated, more well defined in the Bauhaus, but the idea is coming from the earlier buildings that he designed. Again, the glass box, the workshop wing of Bauhaus and the office wing of the Vegas Schulas factory, and now glass is wrapped around, glass is wrapped around. Now you find the fine difference. These piers, though recessed, are breaking the glass facade, and then there is this dark band appearing which shows you that it has got 3 stories in it. Here that disappears. It has got 3 stories in it, but there is no intervening brick pier. Everything is recessed inside the building. The glass box appears pure throughout, completely wrapping around, and there is no band here to define or to differentiate the stories. It is a complete glass box. That is the difference, but definitely the idea carried forward from the Vegas Schulas factory. Then the glass facade itself, and again you find that distinction, how clear the glass facade is, how curtain wall top to bottom, whereas here you find these divisions happening in between. Now this glass facade was then carried forward in many buildings in the modern times all the way up to the 21st century. Now what did the Bauhaus teach us? That with the building technology, industrial technology available, we make our buildings. Now as the technology has continued to improve, evolve, the buildings have also progressed accordingly. So if we look at the Willis Faber Domus, it has got a glass facade without any transoms and mullions. It is held together by this kind of element. All the glass, there are no transoms and mullions. So this kind of divisions that you find as a steel frame in which the glass is embedded in the Bauhaus literally completely disappears in the Willis Faber Domus by Norman Foster in 1975. We find here in the Pompidou Center by Richard Rogers and Renzo Piano that you find this vast expansive space and high-tech architecture, industrial aesthetic, where all the roof with the air conditioning duct is completely exposed, colored with primary colors, and then there is extensive glass here on the outside. We will talk more in detail about these buildings later. This is again the Willis Faber Domus at night, and you can see the building through and through. And then in airport buildings, Stansted Airport, which is a very interesting study, we will look at it in detail later, how it brought in the concept of single envelope design in airports globally, and it was designed by Norman Foster in 1991. This is the glass facade looking towards the tarmac, looking towards from where the flights take off and land, and this entire glass box of the Stansted Airport, and how this became a global concept for airport design, we will look at that later. Then in 2000, the Luma Media Center in Finland by Heikkinen and Kommunen architects, and you find this facade, glass facade here. And then you find in the Rolex Learning Center in 2010 by Sena architects, you find this glass facade here. In the Max Planck Institute of Brain Research in Germany by Foucault's architects, you find this extensive glass facade here, and you see it here also on the outside. This is all coming from the early examples in which Bauhaus is an integral or a very fundamental example for glass curtain walling. He also designed 4 houses for the Bauhaus masters or Bauhaus teachers. These 4 houses were models for a new lifestyle. So again I am telling you this, that these houses, like the Bauhaus building, were not just case studies of architecture, but they were actually conceptual definitions. They were fundamentally defining what the modern house is supposed to be, what it should contain, what it should be like. Just as Corbusier also wanted through the Villa Savoy to explain to us the points of a new architecture. And you will find that it may be that not all the philosophical or conceptual points given by these architects have carried forward in all the buildings of the world that are regularly produced around us, But a lot of these points, like open flowing interior spaces, like the use of glass in the facade, like unornamented surfaces, have become a common feature of modern architecture all over the world. They used a modular system in the design of the Bauhaus because Gropius was very interested in standardized mass produced housing. Large scale of building blocks, large set of building blocks were used. The house was composed of variable prefabricated off the shelf pieces, something similar to what Wright had propounded in the American ready cut system. But the fact is that true prefabrication and standardization could not be achieved in these houses, but aesthetics were improved, where new aesthetics were brought forward by reducing the overall house to a few basic cubic forms, so that rhythm is seen in the four houses of these few basic cubic forms, and of course the use of white planar geometry on the outside, and like other architects were doing, use of primary colors within. So this is the new industrial aesthetic. Primary colors were part of this new aesthetic template that these architects were evolving. This is the master's house designed for Kandinsky, Klee and Klee in Dessau by Walter Gropius, and this is the house for Gropius himself that he designed, and then this is the house of Fininger and Moholy-Nagy, and thus seeing these houses, this is how the houses were designed. There is the Gropius house, the Schlemmer house, the Moholy-Nagy house, and then it was later on reconstructed. This was later on reconstructed, and so besides this, the fourth house is that of Kandinsky and Klee. Now the design characteristics that came out of Bauhaus were, or rather the four houses were, flat roofs, white facades and steel framed windows, modular planning, industrial construction, open plan interiors, and integration of these houses with the landscape of the pine forest around them, and contrasting vertical stair towers with the horizontal volumes of these houses. This is the use of primary colors again in the interiors of the house. So this contrast is repeatedly done. White planar geometry on the outside, very vibrant primary colors on the inside. Now to have a recap of Bauhaus again, the overriding design criterion was there should be adequate sunlight which is penetrate all the rooms. Organization of plans is to ensure efficiency of movement. All the distinct parts are connected together to work together. Efficient construction methods and pioneering construction materials like bricks, steel, cement and concrete were used. And here is the works other than architecture that I was mentioning, product designing. Here is where the maximum change of ideology with regard to the machines we see here, that mass produced goods can actually be very simple. This is how machines can make very simple clean line geometry, standardized products that machines can make, not handcrafted highly ornamented products. But they have, this is the modern aesthetic that we admire, that we use in our buildings today, all the way to simple things like door handles. Now this functionalism of Bauhaus, different functions or parts of the building having different functions connected together, work together, was then followed in the tuberculosis sanatorium in Paimio in Finland by Alvar Aalto. And the background is that there was a post-war spread of tuberculosis post World War I, and this was a building catering to 4 towns in Finland, and it brings forward the architectural philosophy of Alvar Aalto concerning what is called as total work of art, which he called as in their language Gesamtkunstwerk, that the entire environment is a unified whole. Architecture, furniture, objects should all work together in harmony. So in the Paimio Sanatorium, there is the architecture, there is the furniture, there is the lighting. It is a total work of art designed completely by Alvar Aalto. This is the rooftop, and this was provided so that the patients could sit out on the rooftops and they could have maximum fresh air and sun for their healing. Now, we understand that today it is not a big problem. Tuberculosis is a very curable disease, and these kind of things are not done anymore. We do not have sanatoriums anymore. Patients do not need to be in most cases no need of isolation in tuberculosis even within the family, because there is amazing development in medical technology. But in those days this was the way in which people infected with tuberculosis were treated. So Aalto's design was the winning entry amongst 13 entries. It was located in an undulating terrain, and essentially there were two considerations. There was a clear division between personnel and patient areas, obviously because the patients were infected. It was a better solution provided to patient accommodation, in which the rooms are arranged in a linear manner and they are facing southeast, thus providing maximum exposure to sun and air, and it became a model for hospital buildings throughout the world. Every design decision with regard to Paimio was driven by the need of the tuberculosis patients, like the orientation of the patient's rooms to provide the maximum air and light. The colors were chosen for their calm psychological impact. The windows were designed for air and light. There was cross ventilation, in which there were windows on one side and there was this ventilation openings on the opposite side to have effective cross ventilation. The radiators provided below the windows here were to mix the warm air that was rising from them to the cool air that was coming from the outside, and thus provide this warm environment within, or comfortable environment within. There was a generous ceiling height provided to the rooms, so they have a large air volume per person and reduce the concentration of pathogens and increase patient comfort. There was a quiet mechanical ventilation not to disturb the patients, and the floor was curved here at the edge of the room underneath the window to provide for better cleaning of the floors, so that no dirt would be left behind to prevent infection. The wash basins that are provided within the room for twin bedded rooms, so 2 wash basins were provided. Each was designed in a manner again by Alvar Aalto to prevent splashing and thus reduce the noise of splashing in the wash basin to help the patients to rest. The Paimio chair was designed to ease the breathing. It was designed in such a manner that when the patient sits on it, the way he sits, his lungs are able to open up, he is able to breathe more freely, and thus every aspect of the Paimio sanatorium was patient focused. And Alvar Aalto took adequate steps to ensure that every aspect of the design had that thing in it. The cupboards were raised from the floor, for example. Here they are shown as an example, but they were, if you see them in the actual picture of the room, they are raised from the floor to provide easy cleaning underneath the cupboard, and also the furniture underneath. Everything is raised so that there is proper air circulation taking place underneath the furniture for better ventilation and dryness in the facilities. And to avoid dirt from collecting in the corners of the cupboard, he designed it so that there are no sharp corners to prevent and to help in infection control. And also the cupboards had appropriate height, simple handles, so that weak patients could also operate it. So why I am giving you these fine details is to indicate how finely Alvar Aalto had considered the needs of the patient. The Bauhausian concept that we find in the Paimio sanatorium is this: there is a zoning of activities similar to the Bauhaus concept and Gropius's proposition of segregation of activities. So here is how it is done. There is the patient wing, then there are the common areas, then there is the C wing that has the laundry, the kitchen and the staff accommodation, and the D wing has the boiler and the heating plant. All of it connected together to work together as in the Bauhaus building. These are the early conceptual sketches of Alvar Aalto, and this same idea of functionalism connected together to work together of different components of the building was then carried forward into further future architecture, like Norman Foster's 1978 Sainsbury Center of Visual Arts, in which this Bauhaus functionalist planning with distinct zones is used again. Exhibition galleries, studios, administration, storage are all in distinct zones, but they are all arranged linearly. As you see here, they are all arranged linearly and thus connected together to work together, all enclosed in this high-tech skin, this skin that you see on the outside. We will hopefully talk a little more in detail about the Sainsbury Center later, but each function is internally very clearly defined. And later on in the Louis Vuitton Foundation in France by Frank Gehry in 2014, the Bauhaus concept is still there. There is functional segregation between various galleries, both in the vertical and in the horizontal direction. The way the functional segregation takes place between gallery spaces, auditorium, offices and circulation, there is this floating glass sails that shelter the entire complex with these distinct functions, and there is again this Bauhaus functionalist planning under this entire envelope, distinct parts connected together to work together. We will end here with the second presentation on Walter Gropius and the Bauhaus. Again, we have seen here how the Bauhaus served not only as a model building of international style modernist architecture, but also as an institution for architectural pedagogy. We will then go in the last presentation to a few remaining works of Walter Gropius and how his work was seen when he moved over to the United States and started teaching in the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Thank you.